Well, good morning. It is the appointed time. We'll call to order the meeting of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board for January the 23rd, 2014. It appears that we have a quorum, so we'll go to item 2 on our agenda. You've been furnished with copies of the minutes of our previous meeting on December the 19th. Are there additions or corrections to those minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the meeting. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. Item 3, we have you have in your packet the MAPS 3 Revenue and Expenditure Report as of November 30th, 2013. David, you want to tell us the pleasant news?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As you said, this is the Revenue and Expenditure Report for the period ending November 30th, 2013. It's in its usual format. And on the revenue side for the month, we have $8,854,486. For fiscal year, we have $45,056,741 in collections, and for total program revenues of $353,941,853. On the expenditure side for the month, $2,146,347. For a fiscal year of $11,135,428, for total expenditures of the program $41,038,289. Be glad to answer any questions if you have.
Michael Adams, anything you want to ask us about this or tell us about this?
No comments.
Michael's our resident CFO that we have to rely on. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. That brings us to item 4, an item that is a recommended joint resolution. David? I'm sorry, Sue? Absolutely, you could. I think that's a great idea. It's been moved that that report be approved. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, Sue. All right. Item 4, David.
Item 4 is recommend joint resolution approving change order number 3 for MAPS 3 Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Phase 1 Project 2 parking lot improvements, increase of $11,527.63, project M3-F001A/WC-0805/SC-0897. The reason why there's multiple project numbers is because we have also a water project and a sewer project, and those, the WC and SC, are the water and sewer projects that are associated with that. This is a change order for the parking lot improvements that are well underway at the fairgrounds. And as you can see, there's 3 items. There's some additional demolition when the grandstand was removed and also the monorail was removed. There were some foundations that were left in the ground out there, and they were discovered as we were doing the parking lot. So item number 1 is for removal of the abandoned monorail piers that were out there. Item 2 is additional manhole and conduit. The fairground staff anticipates the need for some electrical and communications in the future, so rather than dig up the parking lot later and incur additional expenses, we can put in some conduits and a manhole now for just $4,304.78. Then there's also a existing drainage inlet that needs to be adjusted vertically for grades out there. So it's some pretty routine items.
Bob, has the subcommittee considered this resolution? Do you have a recommendation?
Yes, the subcommittee considered it at the meeting Tuesday, unanimously recommend approval of the resolution. Well, a small amount to come out of fund.
Is there further discussion? Further questions?
Move approval.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the joint resolution for the change order for the fairgrounds. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's approved. Item 5, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 is recommend resolution approving change order number 1 for MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 2 Project 2 improvements, increase of $8,067.19, project M3-R005A. This is for the Phase 2 improvements on the river, and if you remember, the Phase 2 improvements includes a lot of things, mostly racecourse-oriented items, but it also includes the storage building that's out there. And as we go along, we found that we needed to make a couple of modifications on that building. There's 4 items in this change order. You can see that item number 1 is a no-cost change, and that is relocating the catch cables, and we're calling them trash cables, but they're catch cables for debris that might come down the river, moving those upstream, and that's at no cost. And there's a storage building modification, item number 2, that's to add an overhead door on the east side of the storage building so that they can get, it makes it easier for them to get the large equipment, especially the starting gates, in and out of that building. And then it was decided that it might be best to put in some drains into the floor of that storage building, $2,151, pretty small amount, in order to allow them to do cleaning and washing of some of the equipment that they might have, especially if the weather's bad or if they need to keep it within the building. And then there's also item 4 is another no-cost change item, and that is to change the way that they're going to install the conduits that go across the river. Rather than open cut it, the contractor has asked that he be allowed to bore it.
Michael, you chaired that subcommittee meeting. Do you all have a recommendation about that?
Yes, we reviewed this, and the subcommittee moved it forward, recommended approval.
Right. Are there questions or comments? You want to move the approval, Michael? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution approving the change order for the river project. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. Item 6, David.
Item 6 is recommend resolution approving change order number 1 for MAPS 3 Phase 1, Project 1, sidewalk improvements, increase of $7,110, project M3-W001. What we're seeing is change orders, obviously, that are coming up because we're under construction with a lot of projects. So this is one of the sidewalk projects that we have, and this one is specifically for some irrigation line replacement. Irrigation lines are hard to see when you're out doing the design because the irrigation heads are often below ground and hidden. So this is a change order to replace some irrigation items that were removed during sidewalk construction.
Sue, did your committee have a recommendation about this?
The committee unanimously recommends.
Been moved and seconded that we approve this resolution. Further discussion, or are there questions? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. Item 7, David.
Item 7 is recommend resolution approving change order number 1 and amendment number 1 for MAPS 3 Phase 1 Project 2 sidewalk improvements, increase of $95,053.70, project M3-W001A. This is pretty similar to the last change order that we just discussed. There's some irrigation line replacement in here, and there's also some quantity adjustments, which is part of the amendment. So as we get out there in construction, we find that field conditions maybe aren't exactly as were shown on the plans. We find utilities, we just find unknown items that cause some changes. These items were already bid, the costs were established, and all this is an increase in those quantities. So it's not a negotiation, it's just an increase in the quantities.
Sue? All right. Do you move its approval? Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve this resolution for the sidewalks project. Is there further discussion, or are there questions? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is approved. That moves us to the next item. We have a friend and colleague here today to make a presentation to us. David, would you introduce our guest?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the goals of MAPS projects is to leverage that for private investment, and that's one of the charges that the Alliance for Economic Development has. And today we have Kathy O'Connor, who's the president of the Alliance for Economic Development, here to talk to us about the private investment. I'd like to invite her up to give us a presentation.
Welcome, Kathy.
Well, thank you, and thank you for letting me make this presentation to you this morning. We've had the opportunity to present it to a couple of other groups so far. Some of you that are involved with the Park Subcommittee or the Transit Subcommittee may have seen it when we presented it to those groups, but we really wanted to take the opportunity to present it to all of you today. Just as a little bit of background, we began working on this study a little bit over a year ago as a way to try to plan for the private investment that we believe will come from the MAPS 3 projects, and to have a little bit more robust plan in place that developers can look at and that we can use to encourage developers to come to Oklahoma City and make those kinds of investments if they're not here already. Okay. So the presentation today, we're going to go through a few things. We're going to go through the objectives of the study and the team that we assembled, the project context, the market research that we conducted. We did do a thorough market research, market analysis of the area involved in the study. We've prepared an initial redevelopment plan, some redevelopment programming, and the value creation concept, which is the values that can be created from the private investment that's made in the area. I probably need to point out, first of all, that the area that we focused on is the Coeur d'Alene area, adjacent to the park, south of the convention center. We believe that this area has the greatest opportunity to leverage the investments from the park, the convention center, the streetcar, to encourage a great deal of private investment in Oklahoma City. So kind of gone through some of this. The purpose was to identify private development sites and development programs south of the new boulevard, to develop strategies to catalyze the ongoing development in the area based upon viable market programming. So we took like I said, we took a strong look at the market and based our programming of the development on what we felt the market could support. It's maybe a little bit more conservative than people would expect, but we really want to make sure that this development complements the rest of downtown and doesn't compete with it. So the last step of the project was to determine the value capture potential to help speed the absorption. The team that we assembled included the Alliance. We were the project oversight on the plan. Parsons Brinkerhoff did the project management and implementation pieces. Catalyst Commercial did the market study. Catalyst Urban Development did the planning and the tax increment financing analysis. And then Gateway Planning served as an implementation advisor. The scope of the work was to prepare an urban design concept for the core blocks, which are the blocks outlined in red on this map, create a redevelopment strategy for the core blocks, outline the phasing for the core and the expanded area, and then determine the value creation. So just some of the context, which you all probably know about and don't really need to be told, but obviously, MAPS 3 is providing funding for major public improvements in the Coeur d'Alene area. Those improvements should be used to leverage private investment in residential, office, and retail. Right now, there's minimal development activity south of the boulevard. Many of you have probably driven the area. There's not much down there, which is a challenge and an opportunity. The land for the park is actively being acquired, and in fact, we've pretty much completed the acquisition on the North Park and have started on the South Park. One other piece of this is the Urban Renewal Authority was provided some funding by the city during the past year to begin acquisition for private development. It's a pretty modest amount of funding, so we have been trying to be very strategic about how we deploy those resources and acquire some parcels for private development. So some of the opportunities that we have is that the public improvements obviously can spur private development. The boulevard, when we look at planning the boulevard, we feel that it should have a similar scale to Reno Avenue. It needs to be easy for pedestrians to get across. You all have heard this before with some of the work that Hargraves did on the boulevard design, but we do feel that it's important that it serves not as a barrier, but as a way and encourages people to go across into the park and to the development that can happen adjacent to the park. We feel like it's very important that the convention center have 360-degree facades, that it doesn't have any big blank walls that don't interact with the street and with adjacent development. That the Central Park have active street edges, and that the streetcar has stops along Walker and Hudson. There is some publicly owned land in the area that can also be used to leverage partnerships. I mentioned some of the acquisition that we're doing adjacent to the park. But the existing convention center site, for example, someday will become a very valuable redevelopment site if it's determined that that is the best use for it. The investment momentum that can help, that is built from those public improvements is a great opportunity for us. Some of the challenges that we're going to face is that the land ownership in the area is fragmented. There's a lot of individual owners in the area, not too unusual, something that we deal with anytime we look to do development. Land costs are increasing in the area due to the acquisition and speculation. The land cost and the rents that result may not support the desired development. So there could be a gap between what people are willing to pay in rent for an apartment in the area and what the cost of the land and the construction is. And that's where some of the discussion about tax increment financing and some other things may come into play in the future. And then the public improvement phasing will influence how private developers make their investment. So we need to be mindful that as the park develops, for example, we'll begin to see more interest at the north end of the park than at the south end. So and actually, we're already beginning to get some inquiries. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Clonch with Catalyst Commercial, and he's going to go through the market study for you.
Thank you, Kathy. Essentially, our role was to make sure that the area around the Mab Street Quarter Shore area had capacity, and if so, what is that capacity? So our analysis really included four main sectors. We looked at the residential opportunity and growth within the overall region and how that relates to the Mab Street area. We looked at office demand. We looked at retail demand. And then we also looked at specific residential housing and demand, both for rent and in ownership, to see how we might program the Mab Street area. Essentially, our overall findings, most of your residential growth is due to professional housing, a lot of creative class. That certainly would be attractive to the Mab Street area. We see, even though there's a little bit of overhang in office vacancy in general, most of that is the larger blocks. We see some small office opportunity that could certainly feed into and help program the Mab Street area. No doubt with the amount of workforce and the area, there's a big void of strong retail opportunity. Some of that could go into your downtown core, but we see a significant opportunity for general retail, and that will continue to increase with neighborhood services as the residential density increases. Our first phase was really looking at residential for a couple-fold. We think that residential will be a big component of that project. It certainly makes sense in context to start framing up the park. So the first question is how much retail opportunity. So we looked at the overall metro as a whole. What's the annual growth rate? What's affecting that? And is that trend going to continue? And then essentially we looked at what percentage or what capture rate would be realistic for this Mab Street Corridor Shore area. Right now, downtown's getting about 26%. of the Oklahoma City growth. So we were very conservative in our numbers, but assuming that we could get a 3 or 5% piece of that pie, essentially there's about 159 units of demand for owner-occupied units. We don't see a lot of owner-occupied units in this first phase. Some of that residential demand could maybe infill to the west around some of the multifamily or higher density residential, but we think that there's certainly, as the area progressive, an opportunity for some condos and some stacked residential that might make sense on an ownership format. The next phase of our process, we looked at the rental demand, but we also looked at rental performance. The good news is that the downtown Oklahoma market is extremely strong. Average rents are over $1.29 a foot. That certainly can afford a higher quality project and certainly would yield to more of an urban type design. We did notice that beyond other markets, there's a certain strong premium of over 40 to 60% of what your peer markets are able to achieve. We also tested the overall market, what percentage of the market is rental, and then what percentage of the market that is rental is actually transferring into new product versus going into existing product to calculate the amount of multifamily or higher density residential demand. And essentially we were able to calculate, again very conservatively, at least a minimum of 150 units that we could count on per year. Again, currently downtown's getting about 26% of that share, so we think of that pie very conservative that we should be able to get 150 units, 200 units in the Quarter Shore area fairly easy. And that's enough velocity to start developing, generating projects in phases. We also looked at office demand. Most of the categorical demand that we looked for or topology of office users is more the small office users. I think there's a good opportunity for maybe a large campus commercial user to come in, 3 or 4 stories that might make sense, but those are a little bit harder to project. And there are some opportunities with the overhang in the downtown office market with the 15% vacancy that there's an opportunity that might get programmed into that core. So we focused on just the small office units, and currently we're seeing about 25,000 square feet of various small office demand based on some rollover that might occur naturally in the marketplace, plus some new growth by providing the appropriate context and design integrated likely within some multifamily and maybe some service retail. We also spent a significant amount of time just looking at the overall capacity of the retail market within Oklahoma City, how it trades, where the nodes are, and essentially where the gaps might occur based on current supply and the overall market demand based on residential and other factors. Essentially, we've calculated about 200,000 square feet to 270,000 square feet of initial retail demand. The demand is certainly there. I think the palette's not, but as the park gets generated and there's likely several phases, we could certainly capture some of the larger uses, but I think very realistically there's opportunity to harness significant amount of service retail and first floor retail in an integrated mix. Once you hit a certain core, say 1,500 development units, then most likely that's when you're going to get interest from grocery stores and some of the other neighborhood-oriented uses. So we spent a lot of time looking at customer intercepts among multiple nodes. So we actually have customer samples from Norman and Moore and Mustang and Yukon and Edmond and Midwest City. And so we were able to see how these geographies relate to one another to develop essentially what the projected trade area might be for retail in the Quarter Shore area in order to develop the demand. Subsequently, we also spent a lot of time looking at the workforce and getting a census of where the workers are and what their propensity would be for retail demands and services. Essentially, the 55,000 to 60,000 office workers could support up to about 48,000 square feet of additional retail-related demand and services for the Quarter Shore area. We also looked at visitor economy. I think that's a market share that's sometimes overlooked when you're looking at retail demand generator. But with 18 million visitors, I think that certainly has a wallet share that would make sense, that we could likely see go into the park and sort of activating the area and providing some capacity. With the additional visitor demand, we think that that could drive another 75,000 square feet of potential retail within the corridor shore area over time. We also looked at commuter traffic. Certainly there's a relationship between commuter traffic and additional retail demand. We've projected 86,000 cars a day on the completed boulevard and the ancillary streets that would certainly front some of the retail loaded areas. And with that traffic, we were able to apply some capture rate and some spending patterns, and we think that the traffic could generate another 15,000 of more convenience retail, but to cater to that commuter traffic. So with that being said, there's about 275,000 square feet of retail generated just from the residential demand, that core population, but we think there's up to about 290,000 square feet if you look at the visitor economy and additional office demand and then the commuter traffic as some of the roadway and the boulevard gets complete. So with that, that's essentially a high-level summary of our analysis, but we used a lot of this data to feed into Parson Brinkerhoff's work and Catalyst Urban that did a lot of the programming. So I'm going to introduce Tom to let you see how he integrated some of our work into some of his planning. So, Tom.
Thank you, Jason. Welcome. Yeah, it's interesting because we did have to take all that information that Jason just talked about and all the other opportunities and constraints and put together an overall plan that seemed very viable to kind of move forward with. And so what you see before you is that plan. So we look at this as more of a market-based plan, which incorporates the overall vision and the principles that we believe could happen long-term, but takes a market-based approach. I'd like to walk through some of these pieces with you. It'd be good if I had a laser pointer, but I'm going to do the best I can to just describe it moving from west to east. On the far west side, there's actually some brilliant neighborhoods that are already there, and they just need some additional investment, including in them. They kind of go from Chartel and Clawson, kind of moving to the east. So we've kind of shown things there that are more of a mixed neighborhood. We think that whatever happens in the core area, it's going to then blend out and kind of help that area begin to fill in on that west side. Coming closer into the park edge, you see that there's a different development pattern, a little bit more density. We're looking at that about 4 to 5 story product, maybe up to 6 in some areas. We see it having a retail edge along the park, which is those areas in the orange or pink, and then the yellow is more of a density of housing, which could be a mix of small structure parking with some surface for some of the retail areas. Moving across the park, we've got that area between Robinson and Shields. And what we're envisioning there is that needs to be created as a destination. So what we've shown is an inner street on Broadway, which comes down. It could potentially link with another anchor at the end, backing up into the relocated I-40. So what we've shown there is blue. It could be an institution. It could be some other kind of large destination to help anchor that overall district. And then Broadway could be imagined as a street that would move up and align somewhat with the arena, so that on sports days you actually have some kind of alignment, some kind of public place that could go on there. The whole reason for that is if you think of Robinson, if we only front onto Robinson, you're going to miss the rest of it, and you're going to end up backing onto Shields. And the problem there is that coming into Shields off of I-40 is your main entrance into downtown. And so we need to make sure that we really protect that entry with a good urban form. And the way that we want to do that is create a response element that developers can then create. So the idea of Broadway is very important in making sure you've got the right development context for Shields. And please interrupt me at any time if I'm not being clear on any of the concepts I'm trying to communicate here. Along the park, around the park, we imagine that to be very walkable. Some of the opportunities that Kathy had spoken about, that there will be retail edges up towards the north end of Robinson, near the boulevard. We do see that as being more of a commercial edge, and then moving more south, it's going to be more residential. So if you see up at the corner, what I know Hargraves and Associates is called the 100% corner of this area at Robinson and the boulevard, you can see we have some larger format office pieces. What this also means is that the OG&E substation in time is going to need to be relocated. But we also believe that the values created from this could create some kind of joint partnership or something that would allow that relocation to be more viable from a market perspective. Going north of the boulevard, we see a range of things occurring. I'm going to start from the east side where the arena is. In the current planning, there's a large space that's going to be vacated from the relocation of I-40. There's some land that's owned. You see that we've just identified a very large rectangle which is on the south edge of the arena. That's going to be a very interesting space to program. If you imagine coming down the crosstown from the west, and as you wind into downtown, your views are going to be terminated by the new bridge that's going to be right there at the railroad. So we need to pay special attention to what that view is going to be and what that space is going to be. We know that the Thunder needs a staging area, but that's a couple of times a year. How else can we envision programming that area right in front of the arena? So we're imagining that something could terminate at Broadway as it comes in and create some kind of activity. We also know that at Broadway and at the Boulevard, you're going to begin to go down. The Boulevard's going to go down to make it underneath that bridge. So it's going to be a very sensitive urban space, but we need to be very careful on how that view terminates so it doesn't just end up being a railroad bridge, because there's a great opportunity. Also at Robinson and the Boulevard, what's currently located is a convention center hotel that would be right adjacent to the arena. We think that could be a very special place, providing them the opportunity just to the west for the convention center, which is in that north parcel. Currently what we're showing is what is identified from ODOT as that other vacant land that would become available. So we're showing a very thin building. And then there's an open area that I know that the Convention City planners, Todd Both has located that green area. I think some of that still needs to be further defined. What we're showing is pretty much what we were given, but we think that could be a better utilized space. So fronting onto that boulevard, we think can be a little bit higher density and maybe a little bit wider. But that's going to require a public-private partnership because the structure below to support the convention center is going to need to be negotiated. And then it provides the opportunity for that convention center to really have those 360-degree facades that Kathy was talking about. And Kathy, I think, also mentioned the value of that west parcel that could be the expansion area. That could provide some parking for the convention center as well as for the convention center hotel, as well as possibly for some other uses. So we imagine that being developed. It could be a staging area now, it could be surface parking, but we think that there's good value for that to be some kind of mixed use, especially with parking and other kind of liner retail or office. That's a big kind of concept of what we see in the plan. And in terms of looking at what this would mean, again, from a market-based approach, we see it probably lower density than the original Core to Shore vision, but this is based on the information that Jason was just providing in terms of what the market numbers are. And this is saying what would be supported within this area as well as allowing the other Oklahoma markets to expand. And the overall quality, we talked a little bit about the urban design functions. This is just one view of what we would imagine to see around the park itself. Again, it's very important you have high-quality materials, that you have storefronts, that you have porosity for people to walk around, that you give them a high-quality environment. And you've already done so much of that with your Project 180 with the streets around. We just imagine the area around the park to be just as special. So now looking at the overall values and looking at the distribution of markets, we took Jason's work and we identified two areas, and Kathy had introduced them. One is the core area, which are the areas in A, B, and C up at the top. And then we identified an expanded area. And this is mainly for the TIF analysis. The expanded area is D, G, F, and E, kind of going around. And we did that because you can't really make sense of all these different numbers. But what we did was we took that overall program and we put it around. So within that core area, the numbers on the left, we identified a little over 500,000 square feet of office, about 2,500 residential units, and about 77,000 square feet of retail happening within that core surrounding the park. Within the expanded area that could happen later, about another 1 million square feet of office, about another 4,300 dwelling units, and about 150,000 square feet of retail. So overall, within this core and expanded area, we see about 1.5 million square feet of retail, about 6,700 dwelling units, and about 230,000 square feet of retail. In terms of implementation and phasing, we think that the area within the core can be supported now in terms of retail. We think the residential is going to take a while, 17 to 20 years for that, as well as the office. there will need to be some incentive. Providing the TIF district will help in providing some of the infrastructure that's going to be needed in terms of street and other public improvements. But there also may need to be some kind of partnership to get something to actually stimulate, to get some pioneering to happen within this main Quarter Shore area. With that, then we think that the market could begin to take off. When you look at the expanded area, that's going to be a little bit farther down the road. Once the core area begins to take off, we believe that that will create some market for the expanded area. In terms of value, what does this really create? Looking at the core area, we're looking at an improved value of about $300 million. And within the expanded area, a little over 600 million. Brought in combined, about $900 million of value that could happen within build-out of this vision. Wow. So that's a lot of information. But with that, I'd like to turn it back to Kathy.
Just a few final comments, and if you have any questions, we'll be glad to try to answer any of them. One of the things that we've used some of this work for, and you've heard reference to it, is to try to begin to do some of the initial work that's necessary to figure out if we need to create another TIF district that would serve the Quarter Shore area. As I said, it's just kind of the beginning of the process. There's a lot of steps that have to be gone through, and obviously the City Council has a great deal of involvement in that process. But one of the things that I know has come up over and over again is how could we use tools like tax increment financing to fund expansions of the streetcar route or other infrastructure improvements that could help spur private development. So, I think that TIF analysis is really important for us to look at and understand and figure out. The other thing that I think that I appreciate about this plan is that the total build-out investment is $900 million. Sounds like a lot, but when you think about the private investment that's been created from the first MAPS program, it may be extremely conservative. So the private investment from the initial MAPS program is probably approaching $3 billion. So, I think we've taken a conservative look at it, but we want to make sure, again, that this area complements the rest of downtown and doesn't compete with it. So with that, I'll be glad to open it up to any questions or comments or whatever you'd like to add.
Nathaniel?
Well, first off, just want to thank you for presenting this to us. Very good information. And also glad to hear a mention of the importance of pedestrian friendliness getting across the boulevard. I just want to, every chance I get, just say that, because I think it's very important to have that pedestrian-friendly access. The question, though, is do you have any sense of floor-to-area ratio, with the modeling that we're seeing, the square footage and all that, any sense of floor-to-area ratio for these different A through C and D through G tracts?
Well, I think what we think the initial developments will be are probably 4 to 5 stories. We've got to get some proven successes down there before we're going to see anything of any higher densities. And actually, to build the density of a kind of livable community, 4 to 5 stories is probably perfectly appropriate. Along the boulevard, my personal preference would be to see something a little bit taller up at the boulevard edges, but we're going to have to, again, see what the market can support. And it may, sometimes we have to remember how things evolve, and you have to have a few early starts and see how whether or not they're successful before the other developers will come along. If you look at the Deep Deuce apartments, for example, that were built almost 15 years ago now, or probably about 15 years ago, there's surface parking. They're really pretty good design because there's lots of good street edges, but today we'd probably build that with structured parking. So it's evolved quite a bit in the downtown environment. I see the same kind of evolution happening down here in Quarter Shore. So if we want to get more density and taller buildings, we may have to provide more incentives. That's the other trade-off that we'll have to look at.
Kathy, I had a question. In your one of your slides, you said the one of the challenges is coordinating or the pace or coordinating the phasing in of the public projects with the private. And as you know well, our pace has been set by the council with an implementation plan. So if there's going to be an adjustment of pace, or are you suggesting that the pace that we have outlined in our implementation plan is okay, or is the challenge to work the other side of the private side, or do you think we need to do something?
I think most of the way the phasing is spelled out now is fine. We've taken some time to do this plan to see kind of how things with some of the projects settled down as far as site and design and location. And so I think as far as the phasing goes, I think we're in pretty good shape. I mean, we agree with the way that it's been spelled out by council for the most part. Obviously, we'd like to see more of the north part of the park finished earlier than probably than maybe the schedule has, but because we think that's where we're going to start getting initial interest from developers pretty quickly. So, but it's going to be important to coordinate all of it, and that's really the point, is that we do need to coordinate all of it. The boulevard construction, the park construction, the convention center construction,
Sure.
just to make sure.
A fair amount of our planning has to do with as the money comes in. And
Right.
That's
Yeah.
our implementation plan is kind of subject to that as well. Kim, did you have a question you want, or a comment?
It was just a comment in that this is the second time that I've seen this presentation, and I still had the same goosebumps, and my palms are just sweating as much the first time. To me, this is the true brilliance of maps. It's what it brings to the table. It's the promise beyond the promise, the things that you can't see. We see the projects that are on the table and what those $777 million will start to bring. And this shows why. This shows the after effect. This shows the planned growth, the things that make sense, the responsibility in moving forward. And I can't wait to be here for the next 100 years and see it all happen. That's it. Thank you. Great job.
Kathy, this plan talks about a $900 million build-out around the park, which is only, of course, one of the MAPS projects. Have you got any feel for total build-out, maybe spurred by the river projects or along the transit route, or what are we looking at as potential in total?
We haven't, we didn't really look at that. We had to limit our scope to kind of a confined geographic area in order to get something done and to present. I mean, we can look at those other areas. We've been working with the streetcar consultants and that team as they've looked at the economic development analysis that's created, from the streetcar construction. And so we've been involved in that. And so I think that's kind of a separate piece. And we just haven't really had the resources to begin to look at the river and some of the other things. But they all have a big impact. And this area kind of presents this great blank slate for us to work with. And, we really think that it has an opportunity to become a really vibrant residential mixed-use community.
Bob?
Kathy, just kind of a big picture question, really a matter of curiosity. Do we have the capacity now in terms of developers that are already here to do all of this build out over time? Are we looking at either hoping that other developers come in or soliciting other developers from other states, perhaps even internationally, to come into Oklahoma City?
I think we're going to have to solicit developers from other parts of the country or internationally to come to Oklahoma City and help make this investment. One of the things that I hear from the development community over and over again is that there's this lack of capital in Oklahoma City. And we do have some great local developers, and I hope they'll all be involved in Core to Shore, but I really think that for Oklahoma City to kind of get to that next level, we're going to have to get some of that outside capital coming in here and making investments like has happened in Austin and Fort Worth and, other communities not too far from here and not too different from Oklahoma City.
A follow-up, do we have the mechanism to make that solicitation, or is it a matter of we build it and we hope they come?
Well, that was part of the reason for doing this work, so that we had some diagrams and information and tools that we can use to go out and start soliciting developers around the country. I go to a lot of different kinds of meetings that we can do that at, but it's important for us to have the kind of the vision on a piece of paper for them to see it. They're a very visual group of people, and you can talk about it all you want, and until they see something on a piece of paper and understand that the park is going to get built, the convention center is going to get built, all of that's going to happen, that they're a little reluctant. So,
Sue?
I really appreciate this report and the enthusiasm for it. I just think one comment about the conservatism. I know it's important to have data and have the study, but I also think that opportunities come to cities that understand that foundation, but still are willing to take some risks. And I think we've proven ourselves with the vision. And so I know you have a vision in the Alliance, and there's a lot of people that maybe aren't verbal about the support of, even though we are Oklahoma, we are conservative, we want some risk. And we know that it's going to take some. But we're at a really nice threshold right now. So, thank you.
And I think it's kind of interesting, because when I was working on some of the first MAPS projects, I worked for Glenn Deck, who was the finance director back then, and he said, I think Oklahoma City has this kind of community inferiority complex, and it's time for us today to stop playing small and kind of get over our inferiority complex, and we hope that this kind of information helps the council and the MAPS board and everybody do that.
Maybe just one more question for you. As citizens on the advisory board, sometimes we do have questions from the community. I would love to have just something from you that might be talking points that, obviously we don't have the authority, but, as I go out and travel across the United States, I'd love to position a couple comments here and there, especially when I'm in places like other convention centers. So something that leads our discussion to, besides just saying, come and visit. You have no idea what's going on in Oklahoma City. You really need to check it out. So that's been my line.
So we can pull together for you.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for coming, and Kathy, I do want to say this. If there is, we want to invite you back from time to time to give us an update, and I think that we would be very receptive if as the process goes forward, if there's something that you think we could do in managing our process that would add value to what you're doing, we would definitely want you to come tell us. Obviously, the decision makers would be the council, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't welcome you bringing us ideas about how we might alter the pace or emphasize something else or do something differently than we're doing. I think we all have the same goals, and we would welcome you to come back and share those ideas with us in the days ahead. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank all of you.
Any other new business under item 8? David, do you have any items there?
We don't have anything.
Anyone else? New business? All right. That brings us to the subcommittee reports. I don't guess I'll call on everyone individually. Is there a subcommittee that wants to make a comment? Sue?
The Trails and Sidewalks Subcommittee did have a public meeting, and we presented our suggested ideas for routes for that Phase 2 I-44 trail. And so we were eliciting public comments or suggestions on any of those routes, and we had almost 100 people, had 91 that signed in, and we had a few that didn't sign in. And MacArthur is getting those comments all organized for us, and we envision being able to possibly look at possible trail alignment, maybe this next committee meeting in February. So we're progressing there. We also are really close to having all the land for the first trail, the river trail. So we're excited about that too, and you'll see that map.
Great. Gloria, you wanted to give us an update on the senior wellness?
Yes. On yesterday, we had a very good meeting. We appreciate the staff providing us an in-depth review of the draft of the lease agreement between the city and Healthy Living and Fitness Incorporated. And of course, we felt very good about the fact that we now got some kind of a timeline. Staff did present to us an idea of what would take place between now and look at the Healthy Living project being completed by July 2016 and the North Shore project by September 2016. So at least we know where we're going with those two projects, and David may have more to provide to us on that.
You want to do that when your report comes along? Okay. Kim? Park?
The Park Subcommittee did not meet this month, but I'm very excited to share with those that may not know that on January 7th, the City Council adopted the Parks Master Plan. So now we are moving forward onto our next steps in design, and we're on schedule.
Wow. The Convention Center Subcommittee did not meet this month, but there is a lot of work being done behind the scenes by the consultants and staff, so that I think we continue on pace, and we're on schedule on that as well. Any other subcommittee want to report? Okay, that brings us to the informational items. David, under item 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Items A, B, C, and D are all real estate purchases for trails projects, as Ms. Hooper mentioned. Then item E, Danny, if you could bring that map up. Item E shows you the acquisition status. The two gold parcels, actually there's three, but there's two owners on the left side are very close to being acquired. And the one at the bottom there in the middle is just got some technical issues that we've got to resolve. And then the really, really small piece there on the right that's red is actually, we got a judgment on that, so we've essentially acquired that. So we're well underway with acquisition on that. Dan, if you want to go to the next. And that was the piece from Meridian to Council. If you remember, this trail is split into two pieces. So this is the land from Council up to 10th Street. And the two gold pieces that are under contract are actually in your informational items here. So those are essentially acquired. So we're 99% acquired on this piece of the trail. Dan, if you want to go to Whitewater. The Whitewater acquisition map doesn't look as good, but it's not as bad as it appears. There's a lot of parcels in there that are under condemnation on that, and what it represents is just three owners. So there's two owners that own a substantial part of that. So we have been very successful in making deals with the other owners. You can see, I believe there's 14 owners there, and we have made deals with all but three. So that's all we have on the informational items.
That's just great. Item 11, is there anything we've left out that you want to tell us about today, David?
I can add a few things. Just to remind you that the Phase 2 improvements that we talked about in the change order are underway, and that's one of the reasons why you see that the river is down right now. It's been lowered so that we can do that construction, and it's all for the race course. Whitewater facility is in design, and within a couple months that should be out for bids. So we're very excited about progress on that. Senior wellness, as was mentioned, partner negotiations are underway, and we've made substantial progress on that with both of the partners. one thing that we reminded the subcommittee is there's a whole lot of work to be done. There's design, and then there's construction. I know we'd all like to go out and open a senior wellness center this summer, but it's just, it takes time to get these things done. Trails and sidewalks is one of the areas that we've got the most going on. We've got sidewalks in North Oklahoma City and South Oklahoma City, both what we call Projects 1 and 2 under Phase 1 are under construction. Project 3 was just, bids were received this week, and we will be awarding that soon. So we'll have another package of sidewalks under construction. The Phase 2 sidewalks are in design, and then Phase 3 sidewalks, half of the additional money that we received, we're in the process of hiring an engineer so we can get going on that. So we've got a lot of work going on with sidewalks. Phase 1 trail, which we just talked about along the river, half of that is under construction, and the other half will be out to bid here real soon. And then, as Ms. Hooper talked about, the Phase 2 trail, which is the I-44 corridor, we just had that public meeting, and we're well under design on that. So, as I said, there's a whole lot going on with trails and sidewalks. Convention Center, the conceptual design continues with coordination with the park and the boulevard and the streetcar people. So there's a lot of things that still need to take place there. Fairgrounds, parking and utilities are underway. The subcommittee saw an update as far as the construction, and might bring that to you next month, just show you what's going on out there. There's a whole lot of paving that's been put down and a lot of work going on out there. And the design continues on the Expo building. We hope to bid that early summer this year and start construction right after the fair completes this year. Very, very large project out there. Streetcar is moving along. There's a whole lot of things that have to be done with that, but the preliminary design has begun. We're looking at car selection and the design of the track and the maintenance facility. A whole lot of pieces to that. And then, as Ms. Lowe mentioned, the master plan was approved for the park last week, and we are currently in negotiations to get the contract ready for the actual design of the Phase 1 of the park. So we're kind of busy.
Oh, great. Zane?
Mr. Bob, do you have anything you want to add about the acquisition of the Santa Fe station?
I understand that there's been some things have changed here recently. That, you know, we made offers and we were at a bit of a standstill with the station, but I understand the owners have decided that they're going to make a deal with us, and that should be finishing up here soon. And then we've also got the grant that's going on with the additional improvements that we'll be doing at the depot, and the architect selection is well underway, and the design should get started here real soon.
Other questions for David? All right, thank you, David. That brings us to item 12 on the agenda. Are there any comments by board members? Anything else from staff? Mike Mize, you have anything you want to tell us today? Right. Citizens? Any citizens here that would like to make a comment? Well, that being said, I will say this is our first meeting of 2014. It promises to be a very exciting and productive year, and I say as we begin this new year, thank you to each of you for volunteering your time to do these transformational projects for our city. So I really appreciate the time and effort you're putting into it, and thank you, Pete, for the help that we get from you and from the council. All of those things are appreciated. If there is no further business, does someone move we adjourn? Been moved and seconded we adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you. Look at that, 2 minutes.